What is going on, everybody, and welcome to the first actual show of the season, DFS focused. Nothing against best ball. Fuck best ball. We're into DFS now. That's where the real stuff starts. Best ball is behind us. Falling asleep at 9 p.m. trying to draft out of the 9 spot. Not my best look. But what's going on, everybody? It feels awesome to be back. I see a whole bunch of you guys in the chat already. Appreciate you guys being here for us. There was a little snafu with the time because Jake doesn't know his time zones. That's probably why there's so many here. But we'll take the credit. We're the talent. That's what we do. Joining me, as always, Cliffy. What's going on?
Nothing, man. Just kind of feel like you. I feel jazzed up for this season. I don't know what it is. Like, I always look forward to the NHL season, but I feel like super excited. I think it had to do with the playoffs last year. Like, honestly, once we got out of the first round, like the second, third, and Stanley Cup final were just absolutely incredible. And it feels like that momentum's just carried over into the season. Honestly, it felt like I was 8 years old for Christmas. I mentioned on Twitter earlier today, I fell asleep probably like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. I was up at 6. I got like 3 hours of sleep last night. So I was so excited to get back to DFS, to get back to our normal routine, to get back to doing these shows. And we have the first slate ahead of us. It's a 3-gamer starting at 4:30 Eastern. They're doing a triple header for, I think, what we're calling it the opening night of the season. Like, New Jersey and Buffalo played a couple of games in Europe last week, but even the NHL called today opening day. Like, they forgot that New Jersey and Buffalo played last week. So, yeah, I'm just excited to be back, excited to break these games down. Thank you to everybody that's tuning in to join us. And hopefully we can help you guys win a little bit of money here tonight.
Yeah, before we move on, we got a $4.20 super chat by design from the Hypno Toad, who's in our Discord. Says, hey fellas, let's have a great season. Hopefully we start tonight. The DraftKings didn't really put out anything for the 2 games in Europe. Like last year, our own Greg Ehrenberg won the 5K in the showdown games last season. They just didn't care. This season, we have big contests on DraftKings. Looks like they're going to fill. That's going to be great. As always, just wanted to give you a heads up on what we're doing for premium this year. The bot just dropped our affiliate link in the chat. If you click on it, you can get the first 5 days all access. There's no Sims for NHL this year. Just don't want to confuse anybody. Don't want to promise anybody anything. There will not be Sims this year. It's all data packages, get you skater projections, ownership projections, top stacks, and access to the Discord. If you use promo code NHL24, get you the first 5 days, weekly or monthly, for $1. Just go through the link, our affiliate link. It supports us directly. It keeps us busy with these free shows for you. The shows will always be free. If you've never been premium before and you want to take it for a test drive, why not try for 5 days for $1 and hop in the Discord, yell at Daily Deposit Frostback for his goalie pick. Hopefully we're not on the same goalie tonight. That's almost more important than anything we'll talk about strategy, is finding out who he's playing in net and stacking against. I'm only like 31% kidding because it's a new year and hopefully his luck turned around. But it was such a good bit. It was the most profitable bit we had in a long time. But, you know, we do have a 3-gamer. We probably should talk a little bit of strategy. There are about 250 of you in the chat. I'm not sure every single one of you have played NHL DFS before. We have the Utah Soakers. They're a new team. I'm going to call them the Soakers because Utah Hockey Club just isn't it. But we should talk some basic strategy before we get into the game. So I'll kick it to you to kick off the strategy. But basically, if you've never played NHL before, it's most similar to MLB with, you know, stacking. Goalies are, if you played on DraftKings, goalies are like starting pitcher too. It's similar in that sense. There is a lot of correlation. But what are some of the main things you're looking for when you're building a lineup, especially for the like a large field tournament? Because I would imagine a lot of people are playing that $5 lotto tonight.
Yeah. I just dropped a link in chat. Jake Harry, the guy that runs the NHL side of things at Stochastic, he posted an article recently about how to use the tools and the optimizers and things like that. When it comes to strategy, you're right. It is very close to MLB in that you do want to stack. You do some of that in NFL too, although there are, unique builds that I see get there on a weekly basis. But, MLB, you might have like a 4-3 stack or a 5-2 stack or something like that. Yeah. It's kind of the same thing in the NHL. DraftKings, you can stack up to 6 skaters from the same team. You have to pick from 3 different teams, but you have 8 skater slots, so you can do like a 6-1-1. Generally speaking, you probably want to do like a 3-3 stack, 3 forwards either on the same even strength line or same power play unit from one team in one line, and 3 forwards from the same even strength line or power play unit from another team. That's pretty generalized. You can add in a defenseman from either one of them, make it kind of like a 4-3 stack. One thing that became more prevalent, especially with the addition of the 5-shot bonus, is kind of like 3-2-1 stacking, which is like a 3-man stack, a 2-man stack, and then a one-off to try to get bonuses that happen across the league every single night. As more people have been doing 2-2-2 stacks, that's kind of like a more of a higher upside build that you might want to try if you're doing a ton of lineups in the $5. So there are different ways you can do it. Though that's mainly for tournaments. Cash games, you just want to mainly look for value. If you go look at the projections at Stochastic, you can basically just pull up the value list and fill out your lineup going down that way if you're playing cash games. If you're playing tournaments, you definitely do want to stack. The main reason is because it's not like if you stack a 3-man line, each of them is going to put up 30 DraftKings points. The reason you do it is because, if there are 6 teams, maybe there are 2 or 3 skaters that have like 25 or 30 points. But but what you want to do is you want to get the assists that come along with whatever goals they put up, or goals that go along with whatever assists they put up. And you want to make sure that if you stack a line, that you have as big a chance as possible as getting the top score on the night in your lineup. Because if, for tonight, for example, we'll talk about St. Louis and Seattle here coming up. If you stack the St. Louis second line, let's say, but you leave off one guy, that guy goes off, you're sunk. If you stack a different line and the 30-point game comes from a different line, you probably aren't going to win either. Like, you need those top scores. You don't need, the 5 biggest scores of the night or whatever, but you probably need a couple of the top scores, which is why you stack, to give yourself as big a chance as possible in case that specific line does go off. Now, keep in mind, when you stack, it is boom or bust. If your line goes out and gets 7 shots and no goals or anything, probably not even going to cash. So it is a very boom or bust thing, but that's what you want to do when you're playing DFS. So if you do have access to the Stochastic tools, just go to the top stacks. It orders it by top 2 stack probability. The chances that a specific line combination ends up in the top 2 stacks. We'll use some jargon, like Florida 1 means like the Florida top line. Seattle 3 means like the Seattle third line. Perfect correlation is when all 3 guys are on the same even strength line and same power play unit. And those are lines that you might want to specifically target sometimes. So that's a little bit of the jargon we use. And that's kind of the theory and the idea behind stacking in a game like this. Like we said earlier, if you play baseball or if you play MLB DFS, it's very similar to that.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll add, I know I've had people, it's a short slate, be like, hey, you getting Josh stack tonight? In that big tournament, I would not advise a 6-man stack, right? It's not like with these teams, there's a team with like a 4.7 team total against like the worst penalty kill in the league going out and just laying pipe and scoring 6 goals. I think on DraftKings anyway, about as far as I'd go is a power play stack in terms of heavy stacking. Like the Josh stack on a 3-game slate in like a short field, if you want to get unique, is fine. A Josh stack is 6 men from the same team, by the way. I didn't create it, but they just gave me the name because but yeah, no, but power play stack is about as heavy as I'd go. The 5 players on the power play one, it's usually 4 forwards and the defenseman. So that's about as heavy correlated as I'd go. I'll probably stick to like 4-3-1s or 3-3-2s, something like that. One-offs are fine. You just, for one-offs, you're looking for high ceiling type plays, guys that will shoot the puck. That leans you more towards wingers than it does centers, because centers are usually a bit more facilitators. So you're looking for the high floor shot volume, get the shot bonus type deals. But, in a large field tournament like that, I'm looking for more correlation just because that will give you a higher ceiling. It does give you a lower floor, but chances are outside of some guy like clicking buttons and hitting 8 one-offs for the nuts, you're probably going to see some sort of correlation in the winning lineup tonight, hopefully.
I'll also say one last thing just to add on about hockey specifically. Again, going back to baseball, think of the Chicago White Sox in being one of the worst teams in modern baseball history, and they still won a quarter of their games because baseball is still a random sport. Hockey's the same way. Chicago Blackhawks were absolutely awful team, like awful. One of the worst teams of the last 20 years in the NHL last season. They still won 28% of their games, and they still scored at least 4 goals in 22% of their games. So even absolutely god-awful, terrible teams can go out and have a good night against just about anybody on any given night. So it's something to keep in mind when you're looking at ownership percentages. And, don't run out and stack the team with the 2.2 total, like Josh stacked, 6-man stack them or something like that. But just keep in mind that it is a very random sport. And just because a team has a 3.3 total goal total or something like that doesn't mean they're nowhere close to guaranteed to score 3 goals or even win the game.
Right. And goalies are just wildly random. Just spin a wheel, close your eyes, fade whatever Frostback's doing, and go about your day. Before we move on, we do have a $10.07 super chat from Grade A Flicks. Arden from Yonkers here. Glad you guys are back. Can you do me a quick favor? My wife's birthday was yesterday, 10/7. Can you two wish Elsie happy birthday? Good luck, everybody. Hockey is back. Elsie, hope you had a great birthday. I don't really do birthday shout-outs too often, but Arden from Yonkers is our boy, so happy birthday.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the super chat, and happy birthday, Elsie. Arden supports us, so we'll support Arden in getting you that birthday wish. So yeah, thank you both, and hope you have a happy birthday and enjoy the hockey here tonight.
Hopefully he got you some Spumoni Gardens for dinner. Oh, is that Brooklyn? That's Brooklyn. I'm a mess. Let's move on.
I live in Eastern Canada. Why are you asking?
First game of the night. I don't know. It's a touristy spot, so who knows? First game of the night. St. Louis Blues with a 2. All the road teams have a 2.7 total today, by the way. St. Louis Blues with a 2.7 total heading into Seattle. What a first game of the slate. My voice cracked. That's how excited I am for it. The Seattle Kraken with a 3.3 total. The most random game is starting off this slate. Man, do I have issues with the Blues. I'll let you talk about them for the most part. But like Zach Balduke was in the top 6 all preseason. Now he's not even on the team. So they mixed up their lines, right? It is hold on. Let me pull it up because my screen just reset. They have Rock Neighbors and Dylan Holloway, a top line that's 13,200. Thomas and Neighbors are on the top power play unit. I do like Jake Neighbors. Dylan Holloway does have a very good track record in the AHL. I just don't particularly love it. Jordan Kyrou with Pavel Buchnevich and Alexandre Texier. I'm a Texier slappy, but this is just not a great spot for him. He's similar. He's like a very discounted Pavel Buchnevich. So like having 2 of those guys on the same line doesn't really make sense. I'm not a huge fan of the St. Louis top 6, but again, like Seattle's just one of those teams, and they have a new coach, so that is another factor. Dan Belisma. He was the Penguins coach for a while. He was the Seattle AHL affiliate or WHL affiliate head coach. He coached Shane Wright, probably why he got the job. They were a very, as I go purple, welcome back.
Grimace
Purple
season.
Josh in the house. Purple Josh in the house. First day of the season. Now you can't even see how gingery I am. That beard is sweet, by the way, but it's a new coach. They can really run 4 lines here. They're running McCann, Eberle, Beniers, Chandler Stevenson, Schwartz, Burakovsky, Bjorkstrand, Wright, Tolvanen, and Gord Tanev, Cartier. The knock we had for Seattle last year with their old coach was all their forwards were playing between 14 and 17 minutes a night. Maybe this changes with the new coach. Maybe it doesn't. It's a variable for tonight, but they can roll 4 lines here. Their power play units are all mixed up. It's a mess. What are you seeing for this game?
Yeah, as you said, the biggest frustration was just the way that the players were used, because you're right. Like, every forward would skate between like 13 and 17 minutes, and then Alex Wenberg would skate like 19 and a half minutes or something like that. And he was like the lowest ceiling DFS player they had on the roster. So it was just very frustrating. One thing I did notice, and listen, this is just preseason and they have weird lineups in preseason, but I did notice that the top line, the McCann, Eberle, Beniers line, they all skated virtually 18 to 19 minutes-ish on average during the preseason, which would be about a minute higher per game if that holds over from last season. So maybe there is the intention of using their top guys more. Whether it happens, we just won't know until Seattle starts playing some games. But you know, Jared McCann is one of those players that I find he's criminally underrated across the league. Like, I was looking earlier, his even strength goals per minute over the last 3 years is the same as Jason Robertson and Braden Point. Like, Robertson had a 40-goal, 100-point season. Braden Point had a 50-goal season. Jared McCann, like, if he has a 19 to 20-minute season, he can put up like 40 goals and 40 assists. And that's, you know, that's not exaggerating. It also depends what they do with their power play too. The way their power plays are set up right now, I would suspect that they're going to be splitting power play time. And I even wrote about that in my picks article, free to read, right up on stochastic.com right now. I wrote about the Seattle third line. Ely Tolvanen, Shane Wright, Oliver Bjorkstrand. Now, I spent quite a bit of time writing on Shane Wright, but last year, Seattle had 9 different forwards earn between 42 and 52% of the power play time. That means they were just basically splitting the 2 power play units. In the preseason, 9 forwards were between 42 and 60%. So what they do at even strength, I think, is still up in the air. I think on the power play, it still looks like at best a 60-40 split, if not like 55-45. So the top unit, or the top line, sorry, for Seattle is perfectly correlated. They do have a 12% top 2 stack percentage. They are going to come in with 18% ownership, but at 14.1K, that's not that bad, I don't think. You know, on a slate this short, either you have that's the line that goes off or you don't. Like, you know, there aren't going to be like 7 lines that score 4 goals each or something like that, unless we have something really insane happen. So I don't mind Seattle 1. Seattle 2, I hate saying I'm not in on them because there are only 6 teams, but I'm not in on Seattle 2. That Stevenson, Schwartz, Burakovsky line, like, Schwartz and Burakovsky just have not played well together in their limited time together with Seattle. Chandler Stevenson comes in. I think he can rebound from what he did last season. He had a really down year last year in Vegas compared to what he normally does. He's usually one of the best playmakers in the league. I just don't like the wingers that he has with him. They just typically haven't played well together. So while I like Seattle 1, I think I'm leaning towards Seattle 3. Like I said, I wrote them up in the article. Oliver Bjorkstrand, 20 goals last year. He was, I think he made it to the All-Star game. Ely Tolvanen, over the last 2 years, is second on the team behind Jared McCann in goals per minute at even strength. And then Shane Wright is a guy, he's taken a couple years since he's been drafted to really assert himself at the AHL level. And he's definitely like the fact that he's starting out on the third line means that they see him as a better offensive upside player than Yanni Gourde. And Yanni Gourde played a lot of minutes for this team last year. So it seems like they like what Shane Wright did in preseason. So I really do like that third line as a filler line. If you want to just one-off Jared McCann and walk away, he's their highest upside player. I don't think there's any question about that. I think that's fine. If you want to one-off Eeli Tolvanen. Eeli Tolvanen projects extremely well over on the projections today. Only Barrett Hayton on DraftKings has a higher point per dollar value. So I think Tolvanen makes a fine one-off as well. But I really do like that Seattle 3 line. Seattle 3 and Seattle 1 on that side. From St. Louis, here's the issue is St. Louis is not a team that generates a lot of shots, right? Like you're probably not going to have 2 or 3 guys on the team reach the shot bonus. Like they focus on quality a lot more than quantity. And Seattle, I wrote about this in the picks article. Seattle's the goaltender we thought was starting was Joey Daccord. He had the lowest high danger shot attempts against per minute of any goalie, any regular starting goalie in the league last year. Like Seattle is a team that really locks it down defensively. There wasn't a lot of turnover. Like all they really did was add Brandon Montour, add Chandler Stevenson. Shane Wright looks to be a full-time player. All they did was really add to the roster last year. Their problem last year was they couldn't score as a team. It wasn't their defensive side. So, if I'm picking from St. Louis, I'm definitely focusing on the power play guys. You have Thomas and Neighbors on the top line. Putting them with Holloway. Holloway's only 2,500 on DK. I wrote about him in the picks article. You're right. He profiles as a good 20 to 25 goal scorer. So I have no problem going with St. Louis 1. Honestly, think I like St. Louis 2 better. You're right. Texier is kind of like a poor man's playmaker in a few ways, but I think Jordan Kyrou is the best goal scorer that they have. Pavel Buchnevich is a really good two-way player. You get 2 out of 3 guys on the top power play unit. I don't mind that St. Louis second line, and in fact, they're coming in with the highest top 2 stack percentage, even higher than the top line. Now they're coming in with a lot more ownership. But on a slate this size, I think I would just choke the ownership away. So I don't mind St. Louis 2 here. I just do like the Seattle side better. Without Torrey Krug, I don't have a lot of faith in this St. Louis blue line. Like this St. Louis blue line without Torrey Krug, even at this stage of his career, doesn't look very good. Nick Leddy's kind of shot. Colton Parayko, he's good, but he's more good defensively than offensively. Broberg hasn't proven anything yet. Whether it's Kessel or Suter or Tucker, Perunovich is scratched. Like, there's just not a lot of good puck movers on that blue line. That's one thing I kind of worry about. I think for St. Louis, I kind of prefer, if I need a $2,500 guy, put in Holloway. Don't mind a Jordan Kyrou one-off. He's the guy that can pop a couple goals. Jake Neighbors, I think his price is fine. Like, I'm more kind of interested in one-offs on the St. Louis side. I think I'm interested in the Seattle side more. So Seattle 3, St. Louis 1 is probably, or Seattle 3, Seattle 1 is probably where I would look in this game.
Yeah, I agree. On the St. Louis side, I tend to agree with you with the one-offs. I think if I was going to do anything, it would be like a one-off Neighbors, or you could just like 2-man Buchnevich and Kyrou. You could do Thomas and Neighbors, but like you said, Kyrou is really their best goal scorer. They're all on power play 1. You could power play stack them if you're making like 100 lineups or whatever. Seattle's generally been good defensively, you know what I mean? So I'm leaning towards one-offs there.
And here's the other thing. Like, talk about the St. Louis defense. The St. Louis bottom 6, like Braden Shen, Kasperi Kapanen, and Matthew Joseph. Like, Shen and Kapanen were god-awful together last year. 250 minutes together, 23 shots for, 32 against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. This line got caved in. And Matthew Joseph is not good enough to turn from a -9 shot deficit every 60 minutes. Like, he's just not good. Nowhere, like, very few players are good enough to do that. So again, I think that plays to Seattle 3's favor, where they should probably see quite a few bottom 6 matchups here today. It's another reason why I like them. I just don't have a lot of faith in that St. Louis bottom 6.
Sorry, my dogs are going a little bit nuts. But
Well, hey, man, we got our first dog bark.
my son's friends wanted him to come outside and ride the scooters, but he's doing his homework. Dogs love Seattle 3, yeah, and on purple. It's just how else would you expect the season to start? Me turning purple, the dogs barking, muting my mic mid-sentence because that's what I do. Let's move on to the next game. For anyone new to the show and interested in the format, we're going to go through each game. Then we'll go to defenders. We'll talk about defensemen at the end and goalies, and then we'll, make a hat trick pick that I haven't got one correct since the homie Junis Donskoy pouring out for the homie Junis. I think this is the most interesting game on the slate. Just from they played in the play. This is a playoff. I don't even remember. They played in the playoffs.
Each of the last 2 years, Florida and Boston have played against each other.
My wife is roasting me in the chat. We've hit the trifecta. Boston Bruins with a 2.7 total. Heading into Florida, the Panthers have a 3.2 total. She's not calling me Mr. Clean, Mr. Bean. That's what you call me. Defending Stanley Cup champions, Florida Panthers at home to open the season. This game is a 7:00 puck drop, but they're going to have their ceremony, so it's going to be 7:25. I don't know why they just don't make the lock for that game, 7:25, but no time for that. Florida going with Reinhart, Verhaeghe, Barkov, Tkachuk, Bennett, Erod, Anton Lundell, E2D2, Luosterainen, and Mackie Samoshkevich. Look at me with the names. Boston, new first-line center, Elias Lindholm with David Pastrnak, Pavel Zacha, Marchand, Coyle, Geeky, Frederick, Brezo, Max Jones. I'm not a big Elias Lindholm guy, but you saw him make it work with Tkachuk. He can make it work with Pastrnak. Boston's has a really good blue line. Swayman's not starting. He's just gotten to camp. It is Korpisalo. I don't like their forward alignments defensively. Not only that, the game's in Florida, so Florida can dictate here. And Barkov line just absolutely shredded everybody last year. It's probably the new Bergeron line. We can just anoint them the new Bergeron line. They're just disgusting on both ends of the ice. They're going to be getting that Lindholm, Pastrnak, Zacha matchup. Pastrnak and Zacha together last year. Granted, Zacha was at center a good bit of that. They were underwhelming defensively. The Florida top line is great offensively. I don't think Lindholm adds much defensively. So I do really like Florida 1 here. They are the highest top 2 stack on the board. They are also the most expensive line, pretty much by a mile. I think this is one of those games where you can power play stack. Florida does get expensive. Bachwist at 4,200 does give you some salary savings. As someone says, Bachwist is going to be chalk. I'm not sure. He's 4,200. Sergachev's 4,300. Justin Falk 4,600. I think Sergachev will be higher owned than Bachwist just because Sergachev's going to play like 25 minutes. But I am in on Florida here. Both top 2 lines. I prefer Florida 1. On the Boston side, if it was going to stack anything, it would be Marchand, Coyle, Geeky, but that just doesn't excite me. I don't want to stack against Barkov. I think you can one-off Pastrnak. One-offing Pastrnak is always in play, no matter who they're playing. I don't want to say he's matchup proof, but outside of McDavid, he's about as close as you can get just from his shot volume. So for me, I am very much in on Florida 1. I do like Florida power play. At Boston's ownership going into Florida 1, that's just a fade for me.
Yeah, it is a really tough matchup. Last season, that Barkov, Reinhart, Verhaeghe line, 36 shots for, 21 against per 60 minutes, 63% of the shot share. Anything approaching 60% is utter domination. 63% is just absolutely ridiculous, even if the sample's only 210 minutes. Here's the one thing I do wonder about Florida. Brandon Montour left in the offseason. Oliver Ekman-Larsson left in the offseason. They basically, got rid of two of their defensemen, guys that were kind of on the middle pair. Like Ekman-Larsson's ice time tailed off towards the end of the year, so he was more on the third pair. But they basically got rid of the second pair and just moved Kulikov and Mikkola up to the second pair and then put two new guys on the third pair. So, is it going to be the same defensive team when Forsling and Ekblad are off the ice? Because if they're off the ice, it's Kulikov and Mikkola, who are good, but certainly not elite like Forsberg and Ekblad. And then you have Bogfist and Balinskis. There's, Bogfist is on his third NHL team by the age of 25 for a reason. I think with Florida's top guys on the ice, you'll see the Barkov line with Forsling and Ekblad quite a bit go up against Pasternak. That is an absolutely brutal matchup. After that, I think there are ways that Florida can be had. So I like David Pasternak. It's not that I don't. I wrote him up in the article. In fact, I mentioned in the article, the only player with more 5-shot games last year than Pasternak was Nathan McKinnon. Pasternak hit the 5-shot bonus 37 times, which is just
absurd.
It's preposterous. But Florida is a really good defensive team. Pasternak and Zacha, they were good, really good offensively together last year. The problem with Boston's goal scoring was everything after the top line, right? It was who scores when Zacha and Pasternak are off the ice. So Boston won. They're the line that I like the most. I also think they're in the worst matchup. If anything, that line is perfectly correlated on the power play. Like all of Pasternak, Lindholm, and Zacha are on the power play. Florida was the second most penalized team in the league last year. They had a good penalty kill, but it wasn't a super elite, like Carolina level penalty kill or anything like that. So I think there's some merit to using Boston, especially where they have a little bit of positive leverage. I just don't really like going, if Boston was at home and Florida was in town and, they could send out Charlie Coyle or whomever against the Barkov line and then free up Pasternak against the second and third lines, I would probably be playing Boston 1 here. But I just think going up against that Barkov line, which was super elite defensively last year, Forsling and Ekblad are a great defensive pair. The penalty kills have generally been good, even very good. I just think it's a really tough matchup for them. So, I'm kind of off Boston 1 as a stack. I do like Pasternak as a one-off because if that line goes off, Pasternak is going to be involved. So I don't, especially where there are a lot of low-priced lines. Other than the Florida top line, there's only one other line above $18K here tonight. So you can stack a couple $15,000, $16,000 lines and put in Pasternak and be on your way. That's perfectly fine. So I think I'm more interested in Pasternak as a one-off than a full Boston 1 stack. Boston 2 is kind of interesting. What do you think of Marchand this year? He's getting old. I think he's 36 now, but he had 3 surgeries last year, elbow, groin, and hernia surgery after the season was over. And he still put up 27 goals and 61 points or something like that. It's not that bad.
It's not the worst matchup either because Bennett, Kachuk, Erod, very good offensively. They tend to trade chances defensively. If you're going to stack a Boston line, I would prefer to full stack Boston 2, as disgusting as that is. I don't particularly love the line, but they're 14-7. They're not coming in with much ownership. You get Marchand on the top power play. You know what I mean? So it's we said it all last season. If you're going to attack Florida, it's attack that second line. It's just in large field tournaments, I'm more apt to get to some Boston 2 than I would to stack Boston 2 in a single entry. But again, I'm not huge on Boston. I wasn't huge on them last year. I don't really like them that much this year. Obviously, that top line in the right matchups, fully correlated. Yeah, I'm down, even at 24%, but not on the road against the Stanley Cup defending champs going against Barkov. You know what I mean? So it's going to be hard for me to get to Boston 2 in single entry. In large field tournaments, I'm more apt to get there.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with that. And like you and I generally play single entry. Like if I was playing a 20 max or something like that tonight, maybe I'd have a Boston one or a couple Boston ones or something like that. Single entry. I just think this specific matchup again on the road against that Barkov, that great Barkov line and that top defensive pair is just too much to overcome for a full line stack. Again, I do like Pasternak as a one-off, just not the entire line. Zach and Lindholm really don't shoot a lot. So yeah, not in so much there. I think Boston too, like I'm a little bit more interested. They're like I said, there are a lot of like those mid-priced lines. So like, St. Louis too, Boston too, Utah, like there are a bunch of lines in that price range that I think are playable. I don't mind Boston too. I think there's another line in that price range in the next game that we'll talk about that I like a little bit better. So on the Florida side, like I agree with you. I really do like Florida one. Like I wrote them up in the picks article specifically. Like, Sam Reinhart scored 57 goals last year. It's like, sure, he shot was 24%, but he also has the second highest shooting percentage on the power play of any regular player in the league over the last 3 years. Like he's a 30% shooter on the power play. So he doesn't even have to be great at even strength to be a 40 goal scorer again, maybe, 45 goals or something like that. Carter Verhaeghe's only one season removed from a 40 goal season. He had 30 plus last year. Like Alexander Barkov is one of the best playmakers in the league. Like they are priced as the top line on the slate, but they really are the top line on the slate. So yeah, I do like Florida one. There are no real defensive matchups on the Boston side I'm worried about. And also Boston's starting Joonas Korpisalo. Like they signed Jeremy Swayman after Swayman was without a contract for almost all of training camp. Signed Jeremy Swayman a couple days ago. Jeremy Swayman's been one of the best goalies in the league over the last 4 years. And they're going to Joonas Korpisalo, who has just not been that good for most of his NHL career. Like he's had times where he has shown well, and Boston is generally a good defensive team. So maybe he'll look better behind Boston. But it's one of those things like I'm not going to believe Joonas Korpisalo can even replace like 90% or 80% of what Linus Ullmark was until I actually see it. Just because there's been so many bad seasons in Korpisalo's career. So where Korpisalo's confirmed to start, like that's a big, I think a boost over having, instead of facing Jeremy Swayman. So I do like Florida one here. Florida 2 is interesting because Florida 2 is a line that you and I always play. Obviously, Evan Rodriguez had that unbelievable cup final. I think it was 4 goals and 7 points in 7 games or something like that. I wrote up Evan Rodriguez in the picks article today. He's the only player we have projected for under 16 minutes and over 2 shots on goal here tonight because he is a big volume shooter. And Rodriguez and Tkachuk played extremely well together in the playoffs last year. They outshot the opponent by like a 72 to 28 margin per 100 shots. Like absolutely thoroughly dominated the opponent. Problem is Tkachuk is the only guy that's on the top power play unit. I think Tkachuk is fine as a one-off. I think that's a line where I'd be more apt to one-off some guys. One-off Tkachuk is obviously fine. I wrote about Rodriguez. He's in that mid-price range. I think he's fine. Even Sam Bennett, like, we're not super big fans of Sam Bennett, but the last 3 years, 82 game average of 26 goals, again, every 82 games. And he had the 5-shot bonus in like 9% of his games last year. Like he can get there even without that top power play time. So I don't mind the second line for one-offs. The Florida third line is kind of interesting to me because I look at, that Boston bottom 6 is not as bad as the St. Louis bottom 6, but that Boston bottom 6 does not look any like good whatsoever. Like Frederick should be on the wing. Brazo hasn't proven anything yet. Like Max Jones, I think he's fine on the penalty kill. 5-on-5, he's not very good. The fourth line is not good whatsoever. Luosterainen and Lundell were really good together last year. 500 minutes without either Tkachuk or Verhaeghe or Reinhart. Outshot the opponent 34-22 every 60 minutes. Like they were thoroughly dominant. I think Lundell's finally just kind of coming into his own.
They crushed the Rangers in that series too, that line.
Right. And they're 9,400. That's kind of the problem, is like they're cheap. You're probably not stacking them with Florida 1, and who are you playing, Florida 3 with elsewhere on the slate here tonight? That's super expensive. It's kind of the only issue. If you need a super cheap 2-man, I don't mind like Lundell and Luosterainen or Lundell and Samoskevich. Like Samoskevich is, he was like a really good AHLer, fourth in points per game as a rookie in the NHL, in the AHL, in rookie scoring. So like, he's not a nobody. I'm pretty sure he led in goals too with 26. So like, he's a good offensive player. So like 2 out of the 3, if you need a cheapo, I think Florida 3 is fine, but Florida 1 is the best line in this game for me. And it's like, I don't think it's particularly close.
Yeah. On Korpisalo, like, it's going to be hard for him to look worse than he did in Ottawa. But like, Ottawa is where goalies go to die. So anything's going to be improvement. But Swayman's a massive upgrade over Korpisalo. So reverse that. Korpisalo is a massive downgrade from Swayman.
Yeah, and just a couple quick notes. The Seattle St. Louis obviously starts here soon. Grubauer is starting instead of Joey Decord. We mentioned that earlier, but just so everybody caught it, because Decord was in my article, we were expecting him to start because he's been the much better goalie over the last 2 years. But they're starting Grubauer because they're paying Grubauer a lot of money. So Grubauer starts. St. Louis, it looked like they might have somebody dinged up because Zach Bolduc was taking warm-ups, but it looks like Bolduc's sitting. So St. Louis lineup is as expected. It's, what we have in the top stacks tool with Jordan Binnington starting.
Steve Ott is still a coach on that team. Not running the power play, though. Let's get to the last game here. We got the Chicago Blackhawks going into Utah. That's going to sound weird getting used to. The Soakers making their home debut. They're really the Utah Hockey Club, which is one of the dumbest names ever. So as an homage to our boss, Jake Hari, it's going to be the Utah Soakers. Utah going Keller, Schmaltz, Hayton, Genther, Cooley, McBain, Doan, Krause, Machelli. Chicago going Bedard, Teravainen, Mikheyev, Kurashev, Hall, Bertuzzi, Dickinson, Foligno, Joey Anderson. Another team, Chicago, running completely different lines all preseason. Bertuzzi was with Bedard all preseason. Now he's not there. I mean, I don't mind Teravainen there. Mikheyev, are they trying to be a bit defensive there? Like, I'm not really sure what they're trying to do there. Whatever. Utah is coming in as chalk. That top line is fully correlated. Keller, Schmaltz, Hayton, 21.5% top 2 stack, 26.1% ownership. They're fully correlated. And I saw a lot of people in the chat actually saying, "Oh man, I'm power play stacking Utah." I don't mind it, but one thing about the Blackhawks from last year, they're an awful team. The only thing they had to show that was good was their penalty kill. So like, I don't know how much changes there, but just buyer beware. Their penalty kill was very good. They still have Dickinson. They still have some. They brought in Alec Martinez, a very good penalty killer. So just be aware. I mean, the Blackhawks still a bad team. Hayton being on the top power play over Logan Cooley is a bit of an upset, but that's going to put more ownership on Utah 1. That is the line I prefer the most from Utah. Everyone agrees. I think a one-off Genther is fine. He is on that top power play. He does shoot the puck a lot. He is 6K, though. That Utah third line is interesting. I do really like Krause and Machelli. Josh Doan being there in the middle is interesting. I don't think you need a full man, but I think like a 2-man of Krause and Machelli is interesting there. The way Utah/Arizona ran their lines at home last year, that top line saw a lot of the bottom 6, which was the Dickinson line. Now, I don't know how good defensively they're going to be this year. They were an absolute buzzsaw last year, which is insane because the team was awful. So I don't mind Utah 1, but I think if I'm going to do anything on Utah,
My favorite option here is a Kraus Michelli. On Chicago, Utah is a bad penalty kill. Now, they did bring in some new guys, and you kind of hope that does stabilize them a little bit more defensively. Bedard Teravainen in play for me. I kind of wish Bedard was playing with at least one of Hall or Bertuzzi, but beggars can't be choosers. Don't even mind like a Bedard, Bertuzzi, Seth Jones, 3-man power play stack, something like that. I think you can get weird with Chicago here. I think Bedard is an excellent play here tonight. So I like bits and pieces of the top line. I don't know if I'll full stack because Barrett Hayton's so cheap and on the top power play. Mikhail Sergachev's so cheap on the top power play. I think he can go that route. But if I'm going to pay up a little bit, I think it would be for Kraus and Michelli.
Yeah. I hope that the Dickinson-Anderson line isn't as good defensively once again, because I did look last year and Arizona hosted Chicago in March, and that's exactly what they did is they sent out the Keller line against the Dickinson line, and Chicago won the game 5-2. So I guess just like really hope they don't do that again, because the Chicago top six is not going to be very good defensively. Regardless of what they do with the Keller line, I feel pretty good saying that Kraus, Michelli, Josh Doan line is not going to go out against Dickinson. I do like that line. I'm kind of with you. Like Josh Doan is one of those guys, like until I saw him play more, especially at the NHL level, I didn't appreciate like what kind of prospect he is. Like he is a legitimately good prospect, somebody that has improved since he's been drafted. Kraus and Michelli have typically been
there in the organization, by the way. Sorry to interrupt.
No, yeah, I mean, you're right, but hey, if it works out, like who cares? Michelli and Kraus last 2 years struggled without Nick Bjugstad, at least driving possession, but they're still average by goal scoring. And Josh Doan being there should help them out a little bit in the goal scoring front. And I'm not worried about that, getting a second line matchup against Chicago or something like that. I think that's a matchup that the Arizona side can win. And Michelli, Kraus, and Doan are all perfectly correlated on the power play. They're also one of the few lines coming in with positive leverage. 6.5% top two stack, 2.4% ownership. Just to put that into perspective, that Boston line that we just talked about is coming in at more than double the ownership at virtually the same top two stack percentage. Whether you want to get there in a single entry, I'll leave that up to other people. If I was 20 maxing, I would definitely have a few of that Michelli Kraus line with Doan for sure, especially where they're perfectly correlated on the second unit. Like I don't think it's going to be like a 75-25 split on the power play. I think it's going to be closer to like 65-35 or something like that. They'll probably get like 30 to 40 seconds out of every power play. So I don't mind that Michelli line from Arizona, but it is Arizona one that I like best in this game. I wrote about Barrett Hayton in the picks article. That line was really, really good for 2 years and then absolutely sucked pond water last year.
Well,
and
got hurt, never recovered.
That's the thing, right? Is Hayton, he injured his hand in November, had surgery, and it took him 3 months to get back. I think he had surgery on it was November 14th, and he didn't come back until February 8th. And then a month after he came back, he got hurt again and missed the final month of the season. So he only played 30 some games. I will take the 2 years where they had more of a full sample as opposed to that 30 some games where he's probably playing hurt for a good chunk of it, even when he was in the lineup. Even if you include last season, over the last 3 years, that line's at 3.3 goals per 60 minutes of 5-on-5, which is really, really good goal scoring, perfectly correlated on the top power play. Clayton Keller, 80th percentile shot rate last year. Nick Schmaltz, 84th percentile assist rate over the last 3 years. It's just a really good line combination. And Chicago's penalty kill, they weren't bad last year. Obviously, they were around average, but an average penalty kill isn't something that I'm that, worried about when I'm stacking. So, Arizona, I wonder how many times I'm going to call them Arizona this year, because it's going to be a lot.
Yeah.
That Utah line, yes, they are coming in with negative leverage. The 16,300 and perfectly correlated at home. I think coming in with minus 5% leverage on a 3-game slate, I think is perfectly acceptable. So I really do like Arizona 1. If I was going to play another line from Arizona 1, there I go again. If I was going to play another line from that franchise, it would be the Doan, Krause, Michelli line, just because they are going to come in super low owned. And Krause is a 20-goal scorer. Michelli is a great playmaker, like a first line playmaker. And Doan is a rising prospect for the team who can finish. So I do like that line. I'm with you. Genther one off, I think is fine. I'm not super excited on the Genther Cooley line with Jack McBain there. McBain is not a prospect like Josh Doan is. McBain's more there for like their protection, like kind of like an enforcer protector type than he is go out and score 20 goals and put up 45 points type guy. So for me, it's definitely the Utah top line I like best. The Josh Doan, Krause, Michelli line I think is fine. On the Chicago side, oh, man, I am really not a fan of that top line with Mikheyev there. I'd be fine with two Manning, Connor Bedard, and Teuvo Teravainen. Like Teravainen, his numbers have gone down the last couple of years, but it was really only last year that his underlying like playmaking metrics really kind of tanked. So it was really one bad year of underlying scoring chance creation. I think he can rebound from that, especially next to Connor Bedard. And, the two of them are on the top power play unit together. They're fairly cheap, 13,800 if you include Mikheyev. The thing is like Arizona had a really bad penalty kill last year. Now they got rid of most of their penalty killing defensemen. Like honestly, they got rid of the 5 most used defensemen on the penalty kill. 5 defensemen in one off season. Two of them went to Edmonton. So good luck, Oilers fans. So if you want to do like Bedard, Teravainen, Tyler Bertuzzi, because Bertuzzi is still on the power play with them, I think that's fine. Bedard, Teravainen, Taylor Hall, like something like that. Just whatever I do on the Chicago side, I would definitely include Connor Bedard. I'm not terribly interested in that bottom 6. I think there are third lines elsewhere that I'd rather play other than Dickinson, and Joey Anderson. So I think if I'm going picking against Chicago or picking from Chicago, I'm focusing on the 4 top power play guys. I'm focusing on Bedard, Teravainen, Hall, and Bertuzzi. So that's kind of where I pick from, and it's basically like put in Bedard and then pick 2 of the 3 wingers is kind of the way that I would approach it. Just in the off chance that Arizona's penalty kill doesn't. There I go. That's like the 3rd time in one breakdown. Just by the off chance that the Utah penalty kill doesn't miraculously turn itself around in one off season.
Yeah. That Arizona-Utah thing is going to trip me up all season too. Looks like the Seattle and St. Louis lineups are the normal as expected. McCann, Eberle starting against the Thomas Neighbors line. Let's talk a little bit about defensemen here defenseman goalie before we get out of here. The top of the board, we have Charlie McAvoy, 6,100, Seth Jones, 5,800, Sean Durzi, 5,600, Brandon Montour, 5,500. Now, in a better spot, I'd like Charlie McAvoy. Like the only one really in that top range that I like is Seth Jones. He just doesn't leave the ice. 5,800 is fine. Really, the 2 chalky guys, I would imagine, 3. Going to be Justin Falk at 4,600, Adam Bachquist at 4,200. And I think the highest owned defenseman on the board tonight is going to be Mikhail Sergachev at 4,300. Hard not to play him. DK mispriced Sean Durzi at the start of last season. Now Sergachev is mispriced. Sean Durzi was min-priced the first game of their season last year on the top power play. Sergachev, 4,300, running the top power play, is going to play well over 20 minutes. So I think Sergachev, ownership agnostic, is the best player on the board. What are you thinking?
Yeah, for expensive defensemen, I do like Jones over McAvoy. I think McAvoy kind of makes a fine play. Like this is one of those games where McAvoy could just go out and play 26 minutes and put up like a shot block bonus with 4 shots or something like that on DraftKings. Maybe, hopefully he donks in an assist and you're good to go. Like, I don't dislike McAvoy's play, but it's kind of what I said in the breakdown, that in the off chance that Utah's penalty kill didn't improve by like 25% in one off season, I want Seth Jones with what should be an improved Chicago power play, adding Bertuzzi, adding Teravainen next to Connor Bedard. It should be a better power play. So I do like Seth Jones as the expensive defenseman tonight. Mid price range, I think the two guys are Falk and Sergachev, and Sergachev's going to be the highest owned guy. He's top power play unit of 4,300. And not only that, but he can put up 2 shots and 2 blocks per game. Like, he brings peripherals. It's not like he's entirely reliant on goals and assists. So Sergachev is I think Sergachev, if he reaches what he can on that team, will be a $5,500 to $6,000 defenseman on DraftKings once his price kind of settles. So Falk and Sergachev. I think Vince Dunn makes kind of a decent pivot. He's not coming in with a ton of ownership, probably between 10 and 15%. And they're still going to split power play units in Seattle. Game starts in 4 minutes. Like, if you want to get a lower owned guy in that 5K price range, I think Vince Dunn is fine. But I do like Falk and Sergachev the best, just because of their price and because of their upside, even with the ownership. Looking cheap, Dmitry Kulikov was the guy that I wrote up. I think he's projected for 18 minutes on Stochastic. I think he can actually push 19 minutes. So big improvement from last year. So I like Kulikov. Our buddy the Borg, Will Borgen, for cheap as well from Seattle. Andrew Peak, 2,700, I think, for Boston. Like, generally one of the highest shot blocking per minute rates in the league. The question is, does he only play 15 or 16 minutes? That's kind of the issue. Mike Kesselring, he had a really underrated season on the Utah blue line, and I think he's going to be a big part of the puck movement of this team. He's relatively cheap. He doesn't project particularly well because he doesn't put up huge peripherals, but I think he's a good puck mover. And if I was playing like 20 lineups, he's one of the cheap guys I would probably include. So Kulikov, Borgen, Peak, and Kesselring, cheap guys for me.
Yep. Let's talk about goalies. I can name all of them because there are 6 starting. Connor Ingram is the most. I'm going to go most expensive to cheapest. Connor Ingram, Sergei Bobrovsky, Philip Grubauer, Bennington, Korpisalo, Peter Mrazek. Like, there isn't a goalie where I'm like, yeah, let's lock you in. But honestly, like, there isn't one guy that I would really fade over 150. I think the lowest owned I would have is probably Korpisalo, but at the same time, he's going to see a ton of volume. So, like, if you're making 150, I wouldn't X anyone out, but I think my favorites would be the goalies from the Seattle game, honestly.
Yeah, I wrote up Joey Decord in the article. I'm mad that he's not starting, but one game goalie performance, like, I'm not going to overhaul my entire lineup just to not play Philip Grubauer. So I'll still say Grubauer. I think Bobrovsky's just fine. He projects as the highest owned goalie, but the highest owned goalie on a 3-game slate, I'm not that worried about. Korpisalo does have upside because Florida is a very high volume shooting team. It's just, he could also let in 4 goals on 11 shots and be pulled by the end of the first period. So, like, that's kind of the issue. So I'll say Grubauer, Bobrovsky. I think Korpisalo is fine. Connor Ingram, if Utah's penalty kill got a lot better, Connor Ingram all of a sudden is probably going to be a pretty good fantasy goalie this year. So I don't mind Ingram either.
Yep. Before we get to our hat trick pick, just a couple scheduling notes. Again, you can sign up for 5 days premium using code NHL24. Go through the link in the chat. You get weekly or monthly for the first 5 days, get you all premium access to Discord as well. Tomorrow we will be live at 3 p.m. Eastern. There is a baseball slate that locks at 3 p.m. Our normal slot is the same as always, 2 p.m. Eastern. Just tomorrow we will be 3 to 4, and then we'll be back in our normal 2 p.m. slot. I think we have shows every day this week, so you get to see us a whole bunch right out of the gate. Who are you liking for your hat trick pick?
One of our off-season darlings. I'm going with the big gun, Dylan Guenther.
Going Eeli Tolvanen.
Ooh, I like that. A little bit of spice.
Gotta stay spicy. He's not on either power play unit. He's going to do it all at even strength.
I love that.
We will be back tomorrow. Like I said, 3 p.m. Eastern. Go through the link, sign up 5 days, promo code NHL24. Thank you guys for the support. We got almost up to 400 people in the chat. I'm going to say guys, but you might piss off some people in the chat. So I appreciate the support. Cliffy does as well. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he's shaking his head. Yes. So good luck, everybody. And we'll see you tomorrow at 3 p.m.
Good luck, everyone.